digitaljamsessions.com.
Hello, my name's Oscar Clark, and I'm lead evangelist at Admix and a consultant and author in Games as a Service. And I'm your guest host here on the Digital Jam podcast. This week, I'm glad to be joined by some amazing people. I have Luke Thompson, I have Sam Huber, and I have Katelyn Coghlan, who are joining us. Let's start. Katelyn, do you want to introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about what you do?
Sure, absolutely. So my name is Katelyn Coghlan. I'm the general manager at a VR and AR agency in New York called the Glimpse Group. So the Glimpse Group is very unique. We're a little bit of an incubator, a little bit of a VC. Really, our whole mantra is empowering VR and AR entrepreneurs who have amazing ideas to get those ideas to market faster. So my focus is on marketing and advertising, bringing VR and AR to marketing and advertising agencies and brands. And my approach there is to bring this technology to the agencies in a way that enhances existing marketing strategies instead of fighting them. I think that's something that's big in the market today, that you have to, push VR and AR as an independent, experience or an independent resource. And I don't think it has to be. I think it can complement a lot of traditional media very, very well. So that's where I come in.
Great. Well, I think that leads us neatly to Sam. Sam, do you want to explain who you are and what we do?
Sure, yeah. So I'm one of the co-founders of Admix. We are a monetization platform for virtual reality and augmented reality. The idea really that we are trying to solve is creating a sustainable business model for creators to give them an incentive to keep creating, which is something that is missing today. We think that one of the best ways to do this is through non-intrusive advertising. So we've built a technology enabling developers to actually place brands within their environment, like a banner on a wall or a video playing on a screen or a 3D model of a product within the experience, so that it doesn't intrude or create a bad experience for the user. And the big differentiator is that we're doing this programmatically. So we plug into an existing ecosystem of brands who can automatically, as easy as they're buying campaigns on the web or on mobile, now for the very first time, they can access VR and AR as well. So we just announced a $2 million raise recently, and we're basically here to connect with more content developers and empowering them to be more successful.
Absolutely. And also we've got involved with working with the VR Focus guys, haven't we?
That's right. So just yesterday, fresh off the press, we've actually announced that we acquired vrfocus.com, one of the leading VR and AR publication. And this is just another part of our strategy, which is, like I said, empowering developers to be successful, whether it's through our product, but also through a community to help them basically get more awareness about the content that they're developing.
But obviously key is all of this stuff comes down to getting people who will make stuff. So we're very glad to have Luke with us. Luke, do you want to explain what you do?
Hi, yeah. So my name's Luke Thompson. I'm the technical director at SigTrap. We're a small indie studio based in Manchester in the UK. And we are currently doing a lot of work with VR. We're really passionate about doing new cool things and how technology allows us to do that, particularly in the gaming space, but not only. So a lot of that at the moment is really interesting around the VR space and the AR space, although we do other things as well. Currently, I'm actually working on the sort of one of the major projects I'm working on is bringing Superhot VR to the Oculus Quest. I'm not a full-time employee of the Superhot team, just to be clear on that, but I'm essentially the lead coder on bringing it to the Quest, which is just really exciting in all kinds of ways. And I will talk about that for hours if you let me. So you should probably stop me here.
We'll do that later. But actually, I mean, Superhot's a really good example of where I met the team in Poland a few years ago now, and it's. Again, it, I suppose, really kind of highlights there are different ways of creating experiences that we're used to. And when you bring those kind of changes of mindsets to content, bringing reality into a virtualized world is a really fascinating thing. And so that's kind of the question I wanted to sort of talk about today, which is, we've got this idea of bringing AR and VR for brands, or bringing brands into AR and VR, or bringing experiences that we understand, a shooter kind of experience. There's something that happens, something that changes when you're bringing either an augmented or a virtual reality construct. So I'm very interested. Can start with yourselves. I mean, obviously, from the point of view of when you're working with brand companies, and people outside of the gaming sphere, how do you get them to understand what on earth this kind of new medium can deliver?
Well, I know for myself, I just come armed with a bunch of demos, which is, I know, really cumbersome, but it really is the only way for people to really wrap their head around what it could do. And it's been my experience that if you put someone in a headset, whether that's a Vive or a Go or whatever, or if you just hand someone an iPad, that has, image recognition or even just like AR Kit or Quick Look on iOS, it goes from like 0 to 60 very, very quickly. I think that once people actually see something and they actually, can get the context behind it's not just letters anymore. It's an actual experience. And I think once they do that, then their, minds start racing. But I think the issue there is that you then have to reel them back in. So I think it's a little bit of, you have to show them where it's at right now. You have to explain where it's going to be in like 2020, 2025. Because I mean, we're at this point right now where websites were back in 98. So Some people had websites, not a lot of people did, but like you saw a website, you saw what it could do, you saw the potential. And then by the year 2000, it was expected, even though it was pretty low level. So I think it's a matter of showing demos, educating people that way, but then being able to like reel them back in and really create a roadmap. And I think people respond very well to roadmaps when you say, okay, in 2019, here are your goals based on the technology, and Apple's going to release an update here, and Facebook's going to release an update there, and then just really build with them, because then you're building assurance in the industry, in yourself, and you're giving brands the hand-holding that they require. Like they want to get into this stuff, but they don't want to waste money, and they don't know what they're doing, and they don't want someone to just sell them $1 million project and walk away.
Yeah, exactly. So Sam, do you see the same thing? Because obviously we're kind of sat on this kind of fence between the kind of brand people and the consumer, and at least the developer anyway. So do you see this kind of, are we winning that kind of conversation where people understand what it takes to bring a kind of real world experience into the virtual?
Yeah, I mean, as far as the developers are concerned, we of course work with developers who already have experiences in the stores and that have already understood these kind of things. The conversation we have with brands for us is slightly different, because what we are not approaching them with the creative background, and we are not telling them to invest money into creating a bespoke experience, but it's more trying to take the existing assets and replicating a model that has worked for them on the web or on mobile, which is placing their brand within existing environments. And I think it's quite interesting to see that in the first few years, every brand had done a 360 videos, and every brand has done a bespoke VR experience. Yep. But that they're then struggling to promote. So what we're trying to do is really giving them another option, which is just, now that there is traffic, now that there are people using these headsets or using AR, you can basically piggyback on those successful experiences and just place your brand in a very native way, in a very engaging way within these experiences. So it's a slightly different approach that we are using here.
I was actually wondering, though, I think I agree with all of that. I was wondering as well, though, whether there's something about the thing that putting a real world object like a brand, an advert for a pair of jeans or whatever it might be, inside a real game. So this reality component, whether are we seeing developers understanding what value that brings in terms of an experience, that kind of grounding in the real world?
Yeah, so that's a really interesting question. I think from what I learned as a developer myself, I mean, I used to run a small game studio before AdMix and always struggle with the monetization options. Developers are not used to have control over the advertising experience. Like on mobile, you basically can put a rewarded video or a pre-roll or a mid-roll or a banner at the bottom of your screen, but you have no control over what it's going to deliver, when it's going to deliver it. And then we saw some solutions like Keep, for example, where you actually could play with the SDK a little bit more and decide when you want these ads to trigger, which was super interesting. So we're really taking that approach to the ultimate level, where the developers can actually bring the ads that they want, when they want, where they want it. They can literally identify areas of the content, identify moments and identify categories of ads that they want to appear. So if the game is something related to sports, you can make sure that only ads about sport will appear in a very specific area of the content. So it's really about, at a high level, it's bringing advertising back into the creative process. And so far, the feedback we had from developers was that they absolutely love it, because they, what they want the most is control over the experience. They're always worried that the ads will damage the experience. If they can place it the way they want, decide when it triggers, decide what it looks like, then it becomes a really different conversation with them. And so far, the feedback was absolutely amazing.
I was just going to move on to a question for Luke, actually, there, because I think it's interesting talking about it from the ad perspective, but we also kind of need to look at it from the kind of consumer experience point of view. And Luke, I'd be interested to know how you kind of respond to these thoughts, because again, what I'm trying to get across is this idea that we are bringing real world brand identities, objects, thinking into virtualized gaming experiences. Now, how do how does that fit with the way you guys work? I mean, does it help you ground the experience that players are having, or is it something that you have to sort of accommodate?
It really depends how you approach it and what you're trying to achieve with a given game. I can certainly see that for, particularly in the mobile space, having those, you're in an ecosystem where ads are essentially the norm, and it's far better to have them integrated into that world than as you say, sort of a banner at the bottom of the thing. And I like this idea that we're at the 1999 website stage of VR, the GeoCities stage, if you will. And a lot of the stuff that has been done thus far has been very brute force. It's this is cool new tech and we don't understand it, so let's just do some stuff, which is great, and that's a really important part of growing an ecosystem. But yeah, you do get these things where either you've got these obtrusive ads, or every brand says, let's do a 360 video. Okay, well, then what? And that's true of game design. It's true of sort of storefronts. It's true of really every part of the ecosystem. And we're really trying to find the more refined way to do all these things, to integrate everything into a single ecosystem and have it all make sense in the way that, things like mobile apps have evolved. They're far more aware of what's the actual use case. How do you fit this in your life? As opposed to here's this completely separate experience which has nothing to do with anything else you're doing, and you sort of have to switch headspace for it.
Yeah, I think that headspace thing is something I'd like to explore a bit further, because if we think beyond ads themselves and we start thinking more about a kind of general cultural kind of impact of clashing kind of real things and virtual experiences, I'd be interested to see what you think in terms of, is this something that is kind of an inevitable part of creating augmented experiences, that we have to connect it with reality? Or, and is it always inevitably going to be a commercial conversation? Or do you think there's a wider opportunity here?
I think it has to be wider just by the nature of it. I think we're at this really interesting place with the industry where it's not new anymore. It's not undiscovered territory, really. And now we're at the point where we need to standardize it. And we need to take a good hard look about what people actually want. Because, we're in the world of Black Mirror and all of these tech horror stories. And we can't just brush those off and assume that it's not going to happen. I think we have to really be okay, this is what people are afraid is going to happen, but everyone's glued to their phone. So there's clearly some value and some desire for it. So I think it has to be some sort of hybridization of marrying virtual and the real world. Because I think that if we just go full on virtual, it's going to kind of neuter the experience. I think that people are going to, see right through it and not be attached to it and then abandon it completely. That's why I'm all about enhancing. We want to enhance things. We don't want to steamroll them and completely change them. And I think if it gets to be all ads and all sales, then again, people are going to see right through it. I do think that there's a way to create sales tool in a way that aren't salesy. So something if you wanted to, I don't know, if you walked into someone's home and you saw a couch and you really liked that couch and you took a picture of the couch and we got to the point where AI could recognize it and let you know where to get that couch, what it's made out of, if it's, using sustainable resources, things like that, because there are things beyond the price tag that people care about nowadays. People care about sustainability. People care about, supporting like their local farms and their local businesses and things like that. And I think that there's ways to tell stories that could yield sales without being an advert.
I like the Shazam for furniture. It's you heard it here.
If I could just really quickly drop in there, I was actually just completely by chance. I was at a really interesting talk last night by a landscape architect who is trying to sort of kickstart. I don't mean kickstart in the crowdfunding sense, but in the more general sense, kickstart this idea of sort of reclaiming unused urban spaces with AR games. Essentially, that you can sort of take these spaces that that might be empty, that might be derelict, that nobody uses, and you can very easily, integrate this with AR and create a game or create a play space. So children, adults, whoever can sort of interact with this. And I think you've got a lot of the same things there, right? You can have this play space, but you look at this statue and it gives you a whole history of the statue, and you sort of get this awareness of the place around you. So it can actually help you not only sort of enhance the virtual world, but enhance the real world as well. And that mix could be, obviously the subject of this is how it affects culture, right? So, and those sort of things could be really interesting.
Yeah. I mean, Sam, do you have any thoughts on that kind of cultural kind of, the blending of the real and the virtual and this cultural kind of grounding? Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think this is a natural evolution. We've changed the way that we told stories. We've started with just telling it to each other, eventually writing them down, then pictures, then videos. It's clear that we've always tried to get more immersed into the action, always try to be as close as possible to reality to better carry, the empathy of the content and also the emotions related to it. So it's kind of a natural transition, which is why I've always been so bullish on VR and AR. It's not just a cool tech that is just made possible by technology. It's actually, if you look at the history of media, this is the way that it is going. So I think, having the digital interact with the real, blend in a way that you can't distinguish the two, that's the ultimate mixed reality dream. And I think that, I'm not saying that, of course, it's going to be only for ads. It's obviously not. There is all the storytelling element around it. But I think what it gives us is the opportunity to do better ads, because that's important to create this economy, to incentivize the developers to keep creating. And if you look at what you have right now on the screens, your phone screen is so small that there's not that many opportunities for brands to be a part of it. They have to intrude. They have to be kind of changing the experience and trying to grab your attention at all costs. With VR and AR, this is not going to be the case anymore, because to the point that was made earlier, we really have this opportunity to kind of do experiential marketing at scale by having this micro experience that you can enter that really are not about sales, are about experiences. But at the end of the day, help the whole economy by getting the developers to generate revenue from their successful content.
And that kind of brings me to sort of the big question, the kind of we always like to sort of end the conversations with this big question. For me this week, I think it's, what will it take for this kind of experience we're talking about to actually happen? I mean, what do you think is going to be required for us to see the mass market adoption of AR and VR technologies? I mean, Katelyn, do you want to have a sort of view on that?
Sure. I think my one sentence answer is going to be a little anticlimactic, but Apple needs to come out with mainstream hardware. I know that it's the answer that nobody wants to hear, but I think that Apple just kind of rules, at least the American market, with an iron fist, and no one is going to adopt this stuff unless Apple tells them that it's okay to adopt it. I think that we're in a good position for that, because brands do want stories. They don't necessarily want to have pushy advertisements. They want to tell stories because they believe that their brand is a story, and people respond really well to stories, and they respond really well to experiences, and they respond when they feel like they're included as the individual. And I think VR and AR will give brands that ability to deliver that to consumers. And again, I'm coming at it from brands because that's my line of work, but it could be for a lot of different things. And I think that people want it. I think that when people see it on their phones or in a headset, they're curious and they want to engage. They just don't know how. And they're a little bit nervous too. And I think they need Big Brother to tell them that it's all right.
Big Apple to tell you it's all right.
Exactly.
Do you want to give us a sense of your thoughts on that?
I guess I'll approach that from a hardware point of view to some degree. I think that if I were to boil it down into one word, it would be accessibility. I think you need hardware that kind of, you know, does what a phone does right now. It thinks in the way you think. It fits itself around your life. As I was talking about the Oculus Quest earlier. I don't get me wrong, the Oculus Quest is not going to be the thing that suddenly makes VR super mainstream, but it does feel like a huge step along the way because it has all these capabilities in a really no fuss form factor. You just put it on and it works. And there's even, you know, it has at the moment limited, but some capability of mixed reality. You know, it can sort of, in the sense that it's scanning a room, it can just about, and this is super early at the moment, but it can just about bring some of those objects into the virtual space. And I think you need to have, for it to really be mainstream, you need something that sort of ticks all the boxes. It's easy to use. It sort of does everything you would want it to do without too much extra effort. Because again, it's at that point that you can go from this kind of brute force approach to a much more finessed approach, and you can incorporate all these elements. You can have games, you can have apps, you can monetize things, and you can, you know, do it again in this organic way that fits around people's lives. And I think that's really, really important.
Great. Sam, do you have any thoughts?
Yeah, so for me, it's the approach. Although I agree with everything that has been said, I think that the hardware actually comes second. People don't buy VR because of the hardware; they buy VR because of the experience, and then the hardware is a byproduct of that. You know, the argument that the hardware is not ready, it's too expensive. Well, it's kind of not true anymore. I mean, we're seeing consoles, we're seeing the Oculus Go at $200. Of course, it's not 6 degrees of freedom, but you still can do, you know, great experiences that we wouldn't even dream about 2 years ago. So for me, the core of the issue is that VR remains a nice to have. It's cool. Everyone knows it's cool. Everyone that tries it loves it, but there is no urgency to experience it or to come back to it. The reason is because they don't know what to expect from VR. People don't know what is the use case for them to use VR. So what's missing is really like what I call the FOMO, the fear of missing out, which is the core of every great product or marketing strategy. And it makes the difference between a nice to have product or a product that sells out and becomes mainstreams. So then there's the whole conversation about how do we create this sense of fear of missing out, which is of course unique content that you cannot have on your mobile or on your console, right? It needs to be unique for VR so that people actually go through the extra step of buying the hardware to access it. And this is why, you know, content like Beat Sabers, for example, this is not the same to play it on a keyboard. All right. So you have to have a VR headset to use it, for example. So yeah, it's through unique content. It's obviously quality. It's obviously affordability, but I think it's a bigger problem. It's really that this FOMO experience that today is not available.
Yeah, I think that's a massively important aspect, and it's often something that's missed in all sorts of industries. And for me, you know, part of that is also tied into the fact that until there's revenue streams for developers to be able to make the next game, it's always going to be tricky to do that. So finding not just investors, but also, you know, business models that allow that, which I think brings us full circle to our original kind of reason why we were talking about advertisers in the first place and why they play an important role in what we're doing. On that note, I'd like to thank my guests, and this has been your Digital Jam podcast.
If you enjoyed this content, don't forget to subscribe and review, and follow us on Twitter at Digital Jam Ltd. Thinking of starting your own podcast? Why not speak to the GL Pro UK team? They handle all of our podcasting service needs. Tell them that Digital Jam Session sent you, and you'll get 10% off your first order. Find out more at www.glpro.co.uk.
digitaljamsessions.com